I have a very dumb idea. So I was recently fortunate enough to get the chance to visit Super Nintendo World at Universal Studios Hollywood. And by recently, of course, I mean in December of 2023. And I had a great time. I thought the park design was creative and immersive. I thought the interactive decorations were cute little distractions. I had fun playing the mini games and looking at all the cute set pieces. I enjoyed Mario Kart Bowser's Challenge. I didn't get to eat at the Toadstool Cafe, which was the main thing I was looking forward to. It rained for basically the entire time we were in Nintendo World and then stopped the second we started going to other parts of Universal. All in all, it was a really fun trip, only partially ruined by the fact that some kid coughed directly in my face and got me sick for 3 weeks. But I still found myself feeling kind of disappointed, and not just because I effectively paid $100 for the free trial version of the Super Nintendo World in Universal Studios Japan, with a smaller park, less rides, and zero room for expansion, but also because this is all Super Nintendo World will ever be. It claims to be a Nintendo theme park, but it's just Mario with a Pikmin statue and a Donkey Kong ride opening up in Japan and Orlando, but that's it. It is not and never will be a full-scale, standalone, dedicated Nintendo theme park. It is a small, themed area stitched onto the back of a much bigger park run by a completely different company, and that's probably going to be all we ever get. And that makes me kind of sad, because I really like Nintendo. I love their games, I collect their merch, I tolerate their relentless barrage of anti-consumer policies, and I would have loved a full-scale, dedicated Nintendo theme park that took full advantage of their decades of history and extensive list of IPs. And I will always be a little sad that this is what we got instead. So as someone who has never been good at dealing with disappointment, I decided to design my own Super Nintendo World, complete with multiple areas and as many Nintendo franchises as I could fit. I mean, someone had to do it eventually, and who better than me? I own a copy of Roller Coaster Tycoon and have an unhealthy relationship with video games. Now, the first thing we need to do is figure out some sort of layout for the park, so I've taken the liberty of getting out my trusty pen and paper. Get used to seeing this a lot, I'm not very good at editing. My plan is loosely based on the layout of Disneyland in Anaheim, California. We start off with a city-themed entryway void of rides of attractions, kind of like Main Street USA at Disneyland, and this weird undefined unnamed area at Universal Studios, which then leads into another smaller central plaza, which then branches off into 5 separate dedicated lands that are all connected by smaller supplementary themed areas. These 5 lands, I feel, are kind of obvious. We've got the Mushroom Kingdom, Hyrule Castletown, Kirby's Popstar Carnival, Inkopolis Park, and my personal favorite, Spaceport NES, also known as the only area that isn't self-explanatory. And then there's the entry plaza itself, which will be themed around Animal Crossing. Let's start there. I think theming the entryway around Animal Crossing makes a lot of sense. It's relatively customary for a lot of theme parks to have a small simulation of a town serve as the entry point to their park. Disneyland has Main Street USA, California Adventure has Buena Vista Street, Universal Studios has whatever you call this, Knott's Berry Farm has the Old West Ghost Town, and Magic Mountain has these areas rarely, if ever, have any major rides or attractions and are often primarily geared towards shopping and restaurants with an emphasis on creating a sense of community and getting you acclimated to the concept of being in a themed park. And if Animal Crossing isn't the perfect IP for this sort of thing, then holy shit, dude, what is? We could have the entryway and ticketing station themed to resemble a bus stop or a train station like in Animal Crossing games of old. We could have a large town hall that serves as a sort of guest services, information booth, and lost and found. Maybe there's a big tree in the center of the entrance plaza, kind of like an Animal Crossing New Leaf, and a series of shops and restaurants themed around iconic NPCs. Obviously, Isabelle and Tom Nook would primarily be associated with the town hall, which opens up space for other characters to make their mark on the town. We could have a general gift shop dedicated to Timmy and Tommy, a clothing shop themed around the Able Sisters, a coffee shop based on the Roost, just please for the love of God don't make it a Starbucks, smaller specialty shops based on some of the traveling merchants, with a few shops that sell imported goods from other parts of the park, and also maybe some merch from franchises that aren't represented within the park, and architecture, amenities, and decorations pulled straight from series history. I also think that it would be kind of cool to include a more collector-focused merch store themed around Red. It could sell higher ticket items like figures, art books, and maybe even physical games. This is a park dedicated to die-hard Nintendo fans, and I think that it would be very lucrative to play into that with some of the stores and attractions. I also think it could be kind of fun to put a little stamp on all of the items that says red seal of approval, and have this running implication that everything being sold at his store are bootlegs and knockoffs. I think that this could be a fun way to give a bit of a wink and a nod to fans who are really in the know, while also tricking stupid ass collectors like myself into buying stuff they don't really want because, well, this is the special edition! You can only get it at Super Nintendo World, it's got a little sticker on it, and now I have 2 copies of 1-2 Switch! I think it could also be cool to include a dedicated Animal Crossing themed restaurant that serves dishes based on individual characters and also has a giant stage in the back of the dining area where GlazeStelar can put on live performances, providing parkgoers with dinner and a show. Not that kind of show! I also think it could be really fun to build the Animal Crossing Museum, but rather than showcasing fossils, bugs, and fish, it could be a museum dedicated to the history of Nintendo, showcasing games and systems and merchandise from all generations of Nintendo's history, and maybe even a few playable demos of some of the most beloved and iconic classic and modern titles. Of course, I doubt that things like the Town Hall, the museum, or Red Store, or even GlazeStelar's performances will bring a lot of repeat visitors to this area of the park. But theme parks are all about immersion, and I think that a lot of fans would get a real kick out of getting the chance to spend time in a real-life Animal Crossing village, complete with a rotating cast of Animal Crossing villagers that roam around the town, posing for photos and interacting with guests. Honestly, I just think that these town-themed areas are a very underrated part of a lot of theme parks, and that an Animal Crossing-themed area that really plays into the things that make Animal Crossing unique, instead of just building a bunch of random-ass rides that directly conflict with the franchise's vibe and direction, could make a lot of fans happy. Moving on to what will probably be the easiest part of this entire video, largely because the bones of what I want to do already exist, let's talk about the Mushroom Kingdom. I would like to keep the existing Super Nintendo World version of Mario Land largely the same, with the majority of my changes boiling down to name changes, ride rethemes, and new additions, because I think the bones of what we already have here really work. The layout of the existing parks are great, the theming is on point, the minigames and interactive set pieces are fun and creative, and the existing rides are popular for a reason. My only real critique is that I wish there was more to do, and I intend to fix that. Starting off with Yoshi's Adventure, I would basically keep this ride exactly the same. Nintendo has always cultivated a very family-friendly image, and I think it's important for a park like this to have a variety of rides that appeal to all ages. And if any corner of the Mario universe is going to be used for a kiddie ride, come on, of course it's going to be Yoshi. I also just think that this ride looks like a lot of fun. It has a lot of high-quality statues and set pieces and looks like an all-around fun experience despite its slow pacing. Continuing on with the things that I'm going to keep basically as is, I think that the Toadstool Cafe and Yoshi's Snack Shack are great themed food locations that fit in perfectly in the Mario universe, especially Toadstool Cafe. Yoshi's Snack Island could probably use a more thematic visual theme. I would also want to keep the general structure and theming of the 1-Up Factory largely the same. I think that this is a really cool themed gift shop, and I think that every area of the park should have its own exclusive merch. That being said, the merch in this store kind of sucks. I fuck with the villain line of t-shirts and I bought a Chef Toad figure, but outside of that, this store is primarily populated by ugly low-quality merchandise, and I really wish that Super Nintendo World did more to differentiate its merchandise from the inside of a fucking GameStop. Actually, the t-shirts at GameStop are way better. I would like a more diverse lineup of exclusive merch with high-quality items and better shirt designs, with merch lines that would preferably be more in line with the kind of stuff being sold at Super Nintendo World in Japan or the official Nintendo store in Tokyo. And now for the big one. I have a bit of a confession to make. I don't really fuck with Mario Kart Bowser's Challenge. I do think that the ride itself is a lot of fun. The physical set pieces were really cool, the overall story is relatively immersive, the queue is crazy, but I was incredibly underwhelmed by the augmented reality gimmick, and I've heard a lot of people complain that the ride is very slow, especially compared to racing-themed rides at other parks. So, I'd like to completely tear out the AR aspects of the ride. I really don't think that they add much to the overall ride, and they kind of distract from what I think is the coolest part of the ride, which is the physical props that they sculpted for the ride. I think that this ride as a whole would be much better as a more traditional, fast-paced darkroom ride. I would also like to make this ride 30 to 40% longer, both so that the ride has more space to move faster and also to add more explicit Mario Kart theming. Because as it stands, this ride feels less like a Mario Kart race and more like a leisure Sunday drive. And I know that people are going to say, oh, but it's hard to make a ride feel fast when it's entirely indoors, and to that I reply, I can see the mummy from the Super Nintendo World entrance. I enjoyed Mario Kart Bowser's Challenge a lot, but I think that if it was more akin to a fast-paced indoor darkroom ride, taking the best design elements from rides like Radiator Springs Racers and the Indiana Jones ride at Disneyland, it would be a much better representation of the Mario Kart franchise. Beyond that, there are two other attractions that I would like to add. The first is a low to medium intensity roller coaster themed around the series' iconic airships, and the second is a theater. I would call the coaster Cloud Top Cruise, named after the Mario Kart track, and it would be sort of a raised coaster high up in the air, but with a low to medium intensity, so that the entire family could enjoy it. Think Goofy Sky School, a low intensity, heavily themed ride that's just fast enough and high enough to be fun for the whole family without scaring the kids. As for the theater, I think it just makes sense. A lot of theme parks have show-based attractions. They act as a fun detour in a day full of ride-based activities. They have a much higher capacity, leading to shorter wait times. They take up significantly less space while providing comparable entertainment value, and they're just kind of fun. And with a lot of Mario games, primarily Mario Bros. 3, Paper Mario, The Thousand Year Door, and Princess Peach Showtime all having a theater theme, if any area in the park is going to have a theater, it's going to be the Mario one. I think that it would be cool for the theater to have a rotating list of shows that would play throughout the day. Maybe a physical on-stage Mario-themed play in the morning, an animated short film in the afternoon, and a Pauline concert at night, with space for special events that correlate with specific holidays and park events. At the end of the day, visiting a theme park includes a lot of standing outside in the hot sun for hours at a time, and I think that a lot of people would appreciate the chance to just sit down in an air-conditioned room for a little bit and watch a goofy little show with colorful, iconic characters. And that is every idea I have for the Mushroom Kingdom. So let's move on to Hyrule Castletown. Things are going to get a bit harder from this point on because I don't really have any more pre-existing bases to work off of. So first of all, for the layout of the land, I think that we should try to create a similarly immersive atmosphere to the one in Mario Land, with tall structures and high walls that block your view of everything that isn't inside this area of the park. As a matter of fact, I would like to apply that design principle to every part of the park. I think the centerpiece of Hyrule Castletown should be Zelda's castle with the Temple of Time directly next to it, and a series of buildings with a Zelda-inspired fantasy-themed architectural style could line the edge of the land, as well as a Lost Woods-themed area that I will talk about later. The architecture in this area should probably be primarily based on the Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess, as those games have the most fleshed out depictions of Castletown. As for the rides themselves, I think that Zelda's castle is the perfect place to house a dark room ride that would take parkgoers on a journey through the history of Hyrule with animatronics and physical set pieces that loosely recount Hyrule's creation myth, the legend of the Triforce, and the cycle of rebirth that allows for the constant return of Ganon and ensures the birth of the heroes destined to stop him. Think Spaceship Earth or Peter Pan. I also think that Castletown would be a great spot to include some sort of water ride, preferably one themed around the Wind Waker. I think that it would make sense to have it primarily indoors, meaning that it could be hidden in any of the buildings, and we could take full advantage of the controlled environment afforded to us by dark room rides. And I know what you're thinking. Pirates of the Caribbean? Yeah, Pirates of the Caribbean. I don't have any original ideas. In fact, the only real idea I have for this ride is that the boat should be shaped like the King of Red Lions. I also think that it would be cool to have a Zelda-themed carousel in the center of Castletown featuring iconic horses from throughout series history. And for the final ride in the land, I would like to introduce the park's first proper high-intensity roller coaster loosely themed around Breath of the Wild's glider. My thought process is that it could be a kind of flying roller coaster like Tatsu at Magic Mountain and be chock full of big loops, twists and turns, massive drops, and high climbs. How would it be themed around Breath of the Wild's glider, you ask? Well, for starters, you're in the air. But also, I don't know, we could slap a triangle to the top of the ride or something, whatever. As for the non-ride attractions in the park, the existing Mario Land at Universal Studios has a bunch of interactive games and set pieces, and I would kind of like to implement a few of them here and there. And I have two ideas for the Zelda portion of the park. I think it would be cool to build a Lost Woods themed hedge maze where you find and scan pieces of the Triforce, and if you find all of the pieces, you unlock the ability to enter the Temple of Time and pull the Master Sword and get like a photo op with Link and Zelda or something. I also think that it could be kind of fun to have a small Kokiri Village themed interactive walkthrough similar to Tarzan's treehouse at Disneyland. As for the restaurants, I really think we only need the one, which would be called Tingle's Tavern and would be an amalgamation of all the various milk bars found in damn near every game in the series, and would serve food and elixirs based on Breath of the Wild, as well as the series' iconic Lon Lon milk. The merch store could be themed after literally any store in the series, there are just so many, but I think that my personal favorite would be the market from Skyward Sword. And that is basically everything that a land needs to be a land. Serving as a connector between the Lost Woods section of Hyrule Castle Town and the left side of the Mushroom Kingdom would be Donkey Kong Country, which would be a single ride land with space to expand should this area prove to be particularly possible. This is, of course, why I would put Super Nintendo Land's newest attraction, Minecart Madness, which just looks so damn cool, and I am very sad that I will never get the chance to ride it because going to Japan is expensive and visiting Florida is a fate worse than death. Moving on to the area of the park that I am the most proud of, let's talk about Spaceport NES. What is Spaceport NES, you ask? It is a placeholder title because I couldn't think of a better name. Nintendo has a surprisingly high number of space-themed franchises. Starfox, Metroid, F-Zero, Pikmin, which will not be represented in this area, and they also have a lot of futuristic or robotic characters, like Rob the Robot and Chibi-Robo. This area would sort of be a catch-all for all of those space and future-themed franchises, and since a lot of these series have their roots in the NES and SNES era, I figured the name kind of works. The first ride I would like to talk about is an interactive shooting darkroom ride themed around Metroid. This ride would be very similar to Disneyland's Buzz Lightyear Astro Blasters and would see riders piling into carts, shooting at physical props in the surrounding environment, and seeing who can get the highest score. Oh, like a video game! And of course, the reason that I'm using Astro Blasters as an example and specifying the use of physical props is because, well, which one of these rides is more fun? Which one of these rides is more fun? Which one of these rides is more fun? Which one of... Do you get the picture? It is always going to be more fun to look at and shoot at physical props than it is to ride around a bunch of screens or wear AR goggles. This is because the most fun thing about the average shooting gallery is the physicality of it all. It feels nice to aim at a real target, pull a real trigger, and see your actions affect a physical object. And at the end of the day, if I wanted to spend hundreds of dollars to sit in front of a screen all day, fucking hell, I'd find a way. The next ride that I would like to detail is a motion simulator ride in the vein of the Simpsons ride at Universal Studios or Disneyland's Star Tours. The reason that I'm suggesting the use of a motion simulator instead of demanding the construction of a more traditional full-scale ride is because this is a Starfox ride. And the physical restrictions of a motion simulator would do a great job of paying homage to the series' roots as an on-rail shooter and would allow us to simulate flying a spaceship in a manner that roller coasters and dark rooms simply aren't capable of doing. I know I literally just said that I'm not a big fan of rides where you stare at screens all day, but I make an exception for motion simulators because of the unique situations that they can put riders in, paired with the versatility of their visual capabilities. And if Starfox is known for anything, it's for being a surprising amount of people's sexual awakening, but also its unique situations and versatile visuals. After that, I would like to propose 2 separate F-Zero themed roller coasters. And I know what you're thinking, 2 rides is a lot for a franchise that can barely get 1 game a decade. Wouldn't it make more sense to give one of these coasters to a different series? To which I reply, what series? If you can find a single Nintendo franchise that is better suited to roller coasters than F-Zero, I will happily change the theme of both of these coasters. But as it stands, out of all of Nintendo's franchises, F-Zero is the most fast-paced and coaster-adjacent with massive, high-speed racetracks that are full of hairpin turns, steep drops, upside-down segments, and even the occasional loop. I would theme each coaster around one of the 2 most iconic F-Zero tracks, Mute City and Big Blue. Both coasters would have carts designed to look like whatever you would call this thing that Captain Falcon drives, and would include speakers that play each track's iconic themes. The 2 coasters would differentiate themselves from one another, with layouts that emphasize different styles of coaster design, with Mute City placing a heavier emphasis on being a more traditional roller coaster with steep drops and loop-de-loops, while Big Blue would play into the series' racing game genre genre and gravity-defying mechanics by being a racing coaster with a heavy emphasis on upside-down segments and several twists and turns. Think Twisted Colossus or West Coast Racers. And that is all I have in my head for rides, so let's talk about everything else. The area itself, as its name implies, would of course be themed around a far-off spaceport on the surface of an alien world. It would have a sleek, metallic, futurist aesthetic, be absolutely full of life-size replicas of iconic spaceships from across Nintendo history, and serve as one of the park's primary adult-oriented areas. The area could also have roaming actors dressed like iconic characters from F-Zero, Starfox, and Metroid, and maybe even some roaming animatronics, like Rob the Robot, the guys from Custom Robo, and that disgusting freak from Nintendo Land. As for the area's restaurants, I have two ideas. The first would be the Federation Force Cafeteria, which would be a Metroid-themed restaurant designed to resemble a space station cafeteria and would serve cafeteria-adjacent dishes designed to look like alien food. The second would be Rob the Robot's Fuel Station, which would kind of be like Toadstool Cafe, except all of the food is being cooked by Rob. And also, it's not Mario themed. It's just like normal food. I think that would be fine. He's just a guy. I mean, we could put like batteries in it if you want. This area's merch store could be a relatively traditional theme park merch store, but themed around outer space and the future and stuff. Obviously, it would focus heavily on exclusive merch for all of the franchises represented in the area, providing die-hard fans of series like Metroid, F-Zero, Star Fox, and even Pikmin with a chance to buy merch for the first time ever. Oh, right, Pikmin. Connecting the left side of Spaceport NES to the next land that we plan to talk about will be a small Pikmin-themed area called Planet Pikmin. It would have a more outdoorsy, nature-themed aesthetic and would stand in stark contrast to the more metallic and futuristic Spaceport NES, while still playing into the alien theme. All of the architecture, lighting, benches, trash cans, everything in the area should be designed to look like it was built using giant versions of everyday objects, kind of like in the now-defunct Bugs Land, in order to give the impression that parkgoers are tiny, because Pikmin. Much like Donkey Kong Country and most of the similar areas, Planet Pikmin would only be comprised of a single ride. I initially had an idea for a restaurant themed around giant food, but then I realized I was just ripping off Pim's Test Kitchen from stupid-ass Avengers Campus, so I nixed the idea. But honestly, I am also just building way too many restaurants. There's only so many meals in a day, and every single one of them is going to cost $90. But hey, if the Pikmin area does well, they could always expand. The area's ride would be a slow-paced, partially indoor and outdoor, child-focused omni-mover that would take riders on a tour of a giant house and its backyard from the perspective of Olimar and his Pikmin. I would also like to hide a giant Chibi Robo statue somewhere in this part of the park, because they're tiny too, and it's kind of funny. Planet Pikmin would connect Spaceport NES to my second favorite area in the park, Kirby's Popstar Carnival. Seeing as Kirby is a series that primarily targets younger fans, and this is, of course, a Kirby-themed area, I decided to design this area with a heavier emphasis on child-focused rides. And with the series' most recent release having a fully featured carnival-style amusement park of its own, I can basically do whatever I want and it'll all be on theme. You call it lazy and repetitive, I call it a 40-minute video. Right off the bat, I would like to steal the carnival aesthetic, the Ferris wheel, the swing ride, and the roller coaster directly out of Kirby and the Forgotten Lands When Daria Remains. But I wouldn't copy these rides one-to-one. I would re-theme them to better fit into the Kirby theme. The roller coaster's layout and indoor segment already works pretty well, but I would want to repaint the track to a darker color like black or purple, and turn the cart itself into the Halberd instead of a generic rocket ship. I would also like to paint the Ferris wheel various shades of pink, yellow, and purple, and decorate the interiors with Kirby murals and provide each car with a unique Kirby character that rides with you. And finally, I would like to make the swing ride visually resemble those hot air balloon rides from the county fair, but all of the balloons are Kirby's and DDD's. I'm also going to steal Disneyland's Astro Orbiters and re-theme them around Kirby with Warp Stars, Dragoons, Wheelie Bikes, Turbo Stars, and other vehicles from Kirby's Air Ride, because come on, that just seems obvious. And for good measure, let's throw in one of those flying saucer rides from those rundown carnivals that just scream child endangerment. And then we'll also sprinkle in some carnival games with Nintendo-themed prizes throughout the area to act as a set of non-ride attractions and further play into the overall carnival theme. And this will really help us out in terms of legitimizing the park, because apparently it's not a theme park without carnival games, for some reason. As for the restaurants and merch store, I think the obvious answer is bringing over Japan's iconic Kirby Cafe and Poo 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 store as the Popstar Carnival's primary eatery and merch store. I would also like to recreate Kirby and the Forgotten Land's Kirby Burger as a secondary eatery and snack shack. Because if any land deserves 2 restaurants, it's gonna be the one based on this greedy bastard. Connecting the right side of the Mushroom Kingdom and the left side of Kirby's Popstar Carnival would be a horror-themed area featuring a Luigi's Mansion Darkroom ride. Think the Haunted Mansion, but with the ghosts from Luigi's Mansion. And also Luigi, he's there too, I guess. I know that having an entire section of the park dedicated to a horror-themed ride might be a little awkward to some, but these kinds of rides actually do really well at theme parks. There's the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland, the Tower of Terror at California Adventure, the Mummy Ride at Universal, a 4th example. Theme parks are the one place where you could experience Halloween frights year-round, and park-goers go absolutely nuts for it. And with a series as popular as Luigi's Mansion, it would make sense for this market to carry over to Super Nintendo World. And hey, if the ride does well enough, the area could expand into a full-sized horror land featuring attractions like the Haunted House ride from Kirby and the Forgotten Land, and rides that play into the horror-adjacent aspects of Metroid and Kid Icarus. The final major land in the park is going to have to be dedicated to Splatoon, because fucking obviously. Splatoon is Nintendo's primary modern IP. It's crazy popular, consistently sells like water in a house fire, and is being treated like a Core 4 franchise at the Nintendo store in New York. Splatoon is very big. So big, in fact, that I can't justify not giving it its own dedicated land. But at the same time, it's still a new enough franchise that I felt the need to justify its inclusion. Splatoon Land, officially titled Inkopolis Park, will be heavily inspired by the designs and layouts of Splatoon 1's Inkopolis Plaza and Splatoon 2's Inkopolis Square, as those locations are both very iconic, very similar, and would likely translate into a theme park much more easily than Splatoon 3's far more complicated take on Inkopolis. Also, for the record, I know that Wahoo World exists, and I'm not going to take much inspiration from it, because I already did something like that for Kirby, and also I fucking hate that map. Similarly to my plans for the Kingdom of Hyrule, I want Inkopolis Plaza to provide a solid lineup of rides that appeal to younger and older audiences alike. My first idea is a high-intensity single-rail roller coaster designed to replicate the feeling of Splatoon's rail grinding mechanic. After that, I think it would be kind of fun to make a water ride full of steep drops where the joke of the ride is that the water is splashing everywhere, but Inklings can't touch it or they'll die. Maybe it could be themed around the Manta Maria or something. I don't care. It's hard to go wrong with a darkroom ride, and I would like to propose a large indoor ride that tells a fully original story about the riders joining up with Splatoon's secret agency and fighting off DJ Octavio with the help of Agent 3 and other iconic characters from across the franchise. I would also like to include a ride that emphasizes the franchise's multiplayer versus gameplay, and the only competitive theme park ride I can think of is bumper cars. So sure, why not? Bunch of squid-shaped bumper cars. And since this ride is car-themed, it probably wouldn't hurt to throw 1 or 2 Excite series references into the decor. And finally, I would also like a ride based on Salmon Run, but I don't really have any concrete ideas for how to adapt this mode into a ride, so fuck it, second Astro Blasters clone, I don't care. I would also like the area to house a non-ride attraction in the form of a physical concert venue, where the series' various musical groups can put on hourly performances. Music and concerts are such an important part of Splatoon's identity, and I think that the chance to attend a live performance by Deep Cut or Off the Hook would make a lot of fans very happy. And also, the Squid Sisters could be there. As for the merch store and restaurants, I would like to propose 2 separate stores as a reference to Splatoon's heavy emphasis on shopping and customization. The first would be a clothing store based on Ye Old Cloth Shop, and the second would be a more general Splatoon-focused merch store based on Hotlantis. Shelton, however, will not be getting his store adapted because firearms are prohibited within the park, and if you let him in, well, then you have to let in everyone. As for the land's restaurants, Splatoon fans will finally get the chance to eat at the iconic Inkopolis Cafe from all 3 games, and for any park goers who for whatever reason would rather eat at the Crust Bucket, yeah, sure, we'll have one of those too. And connecting the city of Inkopolis to the Kingdom of Hyrule would be Porky's Park. This would be an Earthbound themed area based on New Pork City and named after the theme park present in that city. Why a full area dedicated to Earthbound, you might ask? Because Nintendo's retro games are woefully underrepresented in my park, and Earthbound fucking deserves it. As a matter of fact, I'd actually like to give this area 2 rides. One based on the pirate ship ride from the actual game, and another loosely inspired by this roller coaster, but with a more complex layout and a spaceship theme. I know that Earthbound has never been the most popular or relevant franchise out there, but I would argue that its cult following and overall quality has more than earned itself a spot amongst the greats, and I really do want more representation for Nintendo's retro library. And hey, this is a smaller area, so if things don't work out, there is always the option to demolish the whole thing and build something new should a better option present itself. Not you, Arms, shut the fuck up. And there you have it, all of my ideas for my ideal version of a dedicated, standalone Super Nintendo world. What do you think? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you have any suggestions for additional rides, restaurants, attractions, or themes? Let me know in the comments below. Am I only asking for feedback to boost my analytics and manipulate the algorithm? Oh yeah, 100%. Tell you what, okay? If you guys can get this video to 900 billion views, I will buy 40,000 acres of land and build this entire park by myself with my bare hands. Oh, and for anyone who is wondering why Pokemon never made an appearance in this video, that's because apparently they're building their own theme park, so, you know, that's cool. Way to be a team player, guys.